Hey, welcome to another episode of Quoth the Camser, coming at you from the Hill of Beans up above Limlash. Just me and Clovey. I haven't put out an episode of this for a wee while now, and it's costing me something like 20 quid a month to have my podcast hosted on Dan Benjamin's platform, fireside.fm. So I'm kind of toying with the idea of just killing the subscription, because unless my content's earning enough money to pay for the subscriptions, at least after however long it's been, multiple years, I've been putting this podcast out on and off. It seems like sunk cost. And since most of my creative energy these days seems to be going into video, I don't know if it's worth maintaining a separate podcast feed. Now, of course, I could be putting the audio from my videos on the podcast feed. And I, for one, applaud that as an idea, because that's how I consume a lot of my media. I've always been a podcast guy since they started. Back when I used to listen to Security Now with Leo Laporte and Steve Gibson. I think that was the first podcast I started listening to. And then my podcast listening, or playlist, subscription feed, whatever it's called, just got longer and longer and longer. Mac Break Weekly was a big one for me. I used to love that show, even though I didn't have a Mac. It was mental. And that's where I met Merlin Mann, whose content I've been following ever since. Through Merlin I met, I didn't meet any of these people, did I? I came across their content, their web presences. There's a name for that, isn't there? It's like some kind of relationship. I forget what the name is, but it's quite a good name. Where the listener feels like they know the hosts personally, because, you know, they've been listening to them for such a long time, but the host doesn't know the listener from Adam. Not Adam Lissig or Lonely Sandwich, but Adam, the author of The Human Race. So maybe there is some merit behind putting it out on a podcast feed, because you know, a lot of YouTube videos, like for example Tom Buck, he put one out recently that was also a YouTube, I think it was a live stream actually, and it was a celebration of his hitting 100k on his YouTube channel. And I had it in my podcast feed, so I listened to it that way. Same with Bhav Sharma, who does Creators Campfire. Can't remember what the canonical name is, but she does interviews, most recently with big YouTuber. Bloody hell, what's wrong with my memory? Thomas Frank. There it is, it came. And I listened to that in podcast form. Now Tom Buck's, interestingly, is just him monologuing like I do, you know. And I often think podcasts really aren't podcasts unless they've got two people on them, but I know that's not how the definition works. It's something to do with RSS. Audio going out over an RSS feed, I think, is the actual definition of a podcast. So if I'm using Fireside FM as my host, then it is a podcast. Right, that's what I'm going to do. I've decided just through firing this up, I'm going to start putting out my daily video audio as a podcast. I'm not going to edit it for the podcast, so some of it won't make sense when I'm showing things. But I tend not to do that so much. So I think that's what I'll do. So if you're seeing this on YouTube, because ironically I'm doing this other way around, I'm actually making this with the intention of it being an episode of Quoth the Camser, but I thought, well, why not just get my iPhone out and make a video as well? So if you're seeing this on YouTube, and you're interested in getting my video diaries at least as a podcast, which you can then listen to as you go about your day without having to pay YouTube money, because YouTube makes you pay money if you want to play stuff back with the phone in your pocket, unless you keep the screen on, which, you know, I've done. I think we've probably all done that, but, well, no, my wife won't have done that, but, you know, if you're a consumer of lots of YouTube content and you get a talking head video or an interview that you want to listen to, you can put the phone in your pocket with the screen facing outwards so that the warmth of your leg doesn't interfere with the playback. But then you get the ads. You know what I mean? I'm not saying ads are bad, because that's, you know, I want to be making money eventually on YouTube. So ads in that respect are good. But when you listen to a podcast and you get an ad, you can just double tap, right? Skip forward, double tap again. I mean, who doesn't do that? Yeah, if you didn't know about that, you're welcome. But you can do that with YouTube. So it makes sense, I think, to put this out. It's Quoth the Camser is my podcast. If you go to quoththecamser.com, I'll put a thing when I'm editing this, and I'll put a link in the description for the YouTube people, in case they want to check out this as a podcast episode. And I'll keep it going for a wee while. So what I would like from you, if you're a podcast listener of mine, or you're watching on YouTube and you want to move over to audio only for daily consumption, let me know. That would really help me out to know whether it's something that you care about. Because otherwise, I'm spending 20 quid a month and I'm making nothing in revenue, and that's quite a big cost for us at the moment, which we, you know, can't really justify keeping going unless at least there's potential. You know, if there's potential that at some point in the future I might be making enough money through content to pay for subscriptions like that, you know, it's worth doing. And as I said, I'm a podcast fan, so I'm a bit loath to kill it. The other one I've got is my Acoustic Guitario podcast, which was really interviews with guitar players and guitar makers. And I haven't made one of them since, I think the last one I made was Ullapool Guitar Festival. It was 2019, must have been. 2020 was pandemic, so yeah, it's probably the last video I made on that channel, unless Folk Festival. No, that came before Ullapool, didn't it? So I don't know if it's worth keeping that going. What we'll see, I think, is what happens when I go to Ullapool this year, which I'm intending to do. Maybe talking to Richard Lindsay, the organiser of the festival, who's been on my podcast. Maybe he'll be like, what's happened to your podcast? And maybe some other people who I've recorded with will be like, So I don't know, I just need... But the thing with that was, it was an awful lot of work, and it wasn't getting the views, you know, and that, well, it wasn't so much a mental health, wellness, do it for me kind of thing. It was more of a, let's see how this flies as a business kind of thing. And, you know, it was well received from the people who watched it and listened to it, but as a means of earning revenue, I don't know, I think maybe the acoustic guitar world is small enough, never mind the fingerstyle guitar world, which is a subset of the acoustic guitar world. So it's full of passionate people who love what they do. There's just not very many of them. You know, it's the same with fingerstyle concerts. When you go and see these people, there's going to be a high likelihood that at least half the audience is a guitar player. And usually male as well. It tends to be my sort of experience in the fingerstyle world. It's maybe changing a wee bit. But when I go to gatherings and what have you, it tends to be predominantly middle-aged men with enough disposable income to be able to afford handmade instruments. And you know, I love that. I'm there for that all day long. That's why I go to Ullapool and Halifax, and why I used to fly to America every year to hang out with middle-aged men with too much income and lovely guitars and stuff. So I'm not knocking it at all, I'm just saying, you know, as an observation. But it doesn't pay content like that. It has to be something that you're really passionate about, which, you know, I was, and honestly speaking, I'm not sure I'd call it a passion anymore, more of a strong hobby. There you go. And you know, it was good. Making that content was, you know, I learned a lot from it, first of all. That was my first experience with interviewing anyone. Still is, I've never really interviewed anybody else since then. But also setting up multi-camera shoots and microphones and all of that. And I think I did well, considering that that was my first attempt at making that kind of stuff, you know. Anyway, this is rambly, so I'm going to knock it in the head. My point was that I might actually decommission the Acoustic Guitario podcast. That would reduce my costs a little bit, because Fireside FM charges you per show, where Transistor does not. And I moved from Transistor as a host to Fireside because Transistor didn't support Markdown in their show note descriptions, and it was a real pain in the arse. But then, given how often I publish, you know, I could have just put up with it. I could always move back, maybe. Don't know. Food for thought. Anyway, that's going to be me. Let me know if you can. If you've listened this long, thank you. I appreciate it very much. If you do want to support me and help me to maybe afford to pay for hosting, keep me going, there are multiple ways you can do that. There's my mental health morning pages daily newsletter, which goes out as a newsletter on my Ghost platform. So you can go over to camscampbell.com, where you can pay for a subscription, and you'll get my daily handwritten morning pages, written fountain pens and beautiful ink. I've also started putting out my daily video diaries, which go out. They're also linked in my newsletter, so if you want an all-in-one thing, I mean, there are free subscriptions to my newsletter as well, but I don't put out all of the content. Some of it goes out to the paid subscribers only. But if you want to subscribe just as a free member, that's fine. Or you can go to, I'll put a link, you can send me a cup of coffee. You know, that always helps and makes me feel loved. Or there's my Patreon. I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. My Patreon feed, where I also publish all of said content as a daily thing for my subscribers. So yeah, there are numerous ways if you want to help me through these difficult financial times. With, you know, we're struggling, honestly, and our daughter's just about to head off to London for 4 years to study music at the Guildhall Conservatoire, and it's going to be, you know, so I need to start earning income somehow. So there we go, that's my plea, my long-winded plea. There's multiple ways you can support me, and I would appreciate any of them, even the free ones. Thanks for listening. See you later, or rather, I'll talk to you later. Bye.